Hi, I'm Bob, and I'm a recovering internet addict. Actually, that's not true. I'm not recovering. Not even close. It's getting worse all the time. I spend a lot of time on the internet, as you can tell. Just ask my wife. Go ahead to the next one, Shay. We're going to talk just a little introduction. I'll talk a little about the landscape of the internet. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there. Sometimes it can be difficult to navigate. We're going to talk about consuming information effectively, producing information effectively, and then some interpersonal networking, and then the non-technical stuff. Along with being an internet addict, I'm a digital hoarder. You ever watch that show Hoarders on TV? You see those houses just full of stuff? Well, my hard drive looks like that, but you can't see it, so it's somehow a little more socially acceptable. I find a lot of interesting, useful stuff on the internet. Go to the next one, Shay. I retired about a year ago. I've got a little wood shop out back, and I go on Pinterest. I get all kinds of ideas for stuff. I kind of like this one. It'll help me to, well, I have this never-ending, seemingly vain quest to be organized, and this gave me the idea that that might help. But I find a lot of funny stuff, funny little memes. Memes are just funny little illustrations. Go to the next one, Shay. Like this. I have some pretty interesting Facebook friends. Some of you are here, you know who you are. The next, yeah, go ahead, Shay. Some of them we can all relate to. Can everyone read these, by the way? Are they, okay, good. Yeah, yeah, every time I look in a dryer, I think of this one. Some of them are more meaningful to those of us who are older. Go ahead, Shay. Ever have that feeling? Yeah, yeah. I've got one just for the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. Go ahead, Shay. Okay, I can tell when you're done reading. Let's see, what else we got? Oh, some have deep theological content. Shay, go ahead. Some we wish our old Jehovah's Witness friends and family would take to heart. Go ahead. I wish I'd read that one a long time ago. And one more. I really like this one. Yeah, persecution does not equal, contradiction does not equal persecution. Some of us remind us of our old Jehovah's Witness days. And some are just good reminders. One more. I love this one. I think of this one every day. Yep. But along with all the funny stuff, go ahead, Shay. It can be one of your most effective tools for bringing people out of Jehovah's Witnesses and pointing them to Christ, or it can be a colossal waste of time, depending on how you use it. It's like any tool. If you use it right, it'll be productive. If you don't, it won't. We can use it to equip, educate, and encourage questioning, doubting, exiting, and former Jehovah's Witnesses, and to build up others that are in ministry to witnesses. It's interesting how the Watchtower attitude toward the internet has changed over the years. During many of the last years I was a Jehovah's Witness, they just railed against the internet. It was like Babylon itself, just demons waiting, full of apostates and that type of thing. And then seemingly overnight, jw.org just sprang out of nowhere. And now they use it for everything. A lot of their meeting content comes from jw.org. They're showing videos rather than having speakers. I think really that was in reaction to the amount of former Jehovah's Witnesses that are on the internet. They realized that a lot of their people were on the internet looking at what former witnesses were saying, and they felt, okay, the genie's out of the bottle, we're not going to put it back in, so we might as well get on board. So my own exit from Jehovah's Witnesses was largely facilitated by the internet and what preceded it. I really started in probably mid-1993 on a dial-up service. I had my 1200 baud modem, and I'd dial into a service called The Source. The Source was later bought by CompuServe, which was later bought by AOL. And late in 1993, I was on AOL in a chat room about Jehovah's Witnesses. I was an elder at the time, and I was counseling my brothers about talking to these apostates. And little did I know that not too long afterward, I would be one of those apostates. Back then we had mail groups. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have websites as we know them today. But what you would do is you would post an email and it would go out to a whole group. And so we had these discussion groups, and it was all just text-based. There were no pictures or anything like that. But as I researched more and more, I realized that my days as a Jehovah's Witness were numbered. And here I was, still an elder, associating with hardened apostates online. So in January 1995, I stepped down from being an elder. It was a tough thing to do. And then over the next couple of years, I faded out. I progressively went to fewer and fewer meetings. And in 1999, I wrote a testimony letter to 70 of my old witness friends. 2 days later, I got a call from the elders inviting me to appear before them to face charges of apostasy. I sent them about a 5-page legal letter and haven't heard from them since. So I'm technically not even disfellowship. The legal letter I sent them squashed the the judicial action pretty quickly. Then previous to that, in 1995, I was just trying to get my thoughts together. My whole belief system was crumbling around my feet. And so I just started writing stuff down, and I put it up on a website, and people read it and go, yeah, I feel pretty much the same way. And so my website at docbob.org has been there since December 1995, which almost 22 years now. So the next slide, Shay, please. There are several advantages of the internet over print media. When I first started going to Witnesses Now for Jesus, I talked to a lot of people who came out before there was an internet, and they said, we had to go to the local Christian bookstore and get our copy of Crisis of Conscience or whatever it was they were getting. If you got caught carrying one of them around, you got busted. So some of the advantages of the internet are there's a vast amount of data that's instantly available. One of the disadvantages is there's a vast amount of data instantly available. We'll talk a little about filtering here in a little bit. Anonymity, I already talked about that a little bit. With the internet, people can research, they can read, they can engage with other people without being found out. In fact, my screen name, Doc Bob, it was during my kind of paranoid phase. I didn't want anyone to know who I was. I wasn't going to use my real name. And my little nephew, who's now 46 years old, we used to watch The Muppets together. And there was a sketch on The Muppets called Veterinarian's Hospital with Dr. Bob. So whenever I'd come over, my little nephew Johnny, who's like this tall now, it's Dr. Bob. So when I needed a screen name, I picked that, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. One of the other advantages is community. There is a huge, huge community of former witnesses and people who are in transition out. I'll mention that later. Facebook groups are going crazy these days. So we're going to look at a little of the landscape of the internet. Go ahead, Shay. This websites, Facebook, YouTube, internet radio, FaceTime, that sort of thing. and discussion forums, and go ahead. So websites. It's funny, traditional websites seem to some degree to be a little on the wane lately. There's a lot more activity in Facebook and YouTube lately, but I'll give you just some examples. Go ahead, Shay. Already mentioned forwitness.org. So this is Christy Darlington and her crew, including Julie here. Christy, great, amazing lady. She was what, 20 when she put out that book on Yes, You Should Believe in the Trinity? A great work. If you haven't seen it, she took the witnesses, should you believe in the Trinity, and found all of the references and Xeroxed them and has them all in this book so you can see where they took all of these quotes out of context. Also, Julie's doing Diary of a Former JW, right? A blog you're doing. Christy's also, last time I talked to her, she's a real expert on that search engine optimization. Boy, she gets her. So when you search for stuff in Google and you look for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's right up there. Next, Shay. Evidence Ministries, Keith Walker. He's down in San Antonio, Texas. Keith is a really funny guy. He witnesses to Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. He has a really great approach in asking questions. He's done Bible studies with Jehovah's Witness elders and posted them online. And he's just got this really great way of approaching them with questions instead of just hammering them to death, which he's certainly capable of. Next, Shay. Midwest Christian Outreach, Dawn and Joy Vino. They're up in the Chicago area. They cover the whole range of counter-cult work. Joy was one of the early supporters I had on my way out. I still have some printed out emails from her from 1994 when I was still actually an elder and talking to some Christians online. And next. Yes, Steve mentioned JW Facts, Paul Grundy's site. Really well researched. He kind of breaks everything down by subject. Things are pretty easy to find. And next. Watchtower Archive. If you're into looking up the old Watchtower publications that are now in the public domain, you can go there. Watchtower has kind of caught on to people putting their stuff on the internet. They've gone after several websites for copyright violations. They went after a guy, Peter Mosier, up in Canada, and they ended up not only getting him to take his website down, he had to turn over the domain name for the website to the Watchtower. It was just ridiculous stuff. The problem is that he probably could have prevailed if he'd had the $1 million he needed to go up against them in court. But they've been pretty tough in going after people for copyright violations. Next slide. Last but not least, next, the dreaded jw.org. If you're at all interested in Jehovah's Witnesses, you need to go there and watch this. It's certainly not the organization that I knew when I was in. You know, when I first started in the early 70s, we were kind of this small underdog religious organization. You know, we weren't on the radio, we weren't on TV, because the internet didn't exist yet. And now they've got this really slick JW broadcasting. I mean, the production on this stuff is first rate. They put a lot of money into this. And the other thing too, though, if you want to look up what they teach on things, all the old magazines and books are there for you to look at. So if somebody says, oh, we never taught that, well, you go and research it, you can find out whether they really did or not. Okay, next, Shay. And one more. So discussion forums, this is where I've been spending a lot of time lately because I actually get to engage with Jehovah's Witnesses online. Go ahead. Jehovah'sWitness.com. This is the granddaddy of all discussion sites. This is about the third iteration that this thing's been through. You probably can't see it at the bottom. It's broken up into various subjects. They have Jehovah's Witnesses overall. They have Friends. They have another one for ex-witness get-togethers. There's a whole bunch of them. Some of it is you need to sign up to get into those areas. But just under the Friends section, they have almost 4.1 million posts on 126,000 subjects. And it goes back several years. So if you Google stuff about Jehovah's Witnesses, it'll land you here a lot of times. There is a section there on Bible study. It's not the best Bible study section you'll ever run across. And there is some hostility to Christians on there, so just be aware of that. Go ahead, Shay. This is where I've been hanging out lately, Jehovah's Witness Forum on topics. Now, this one is unmoderated, so it can be a bit contentious at times. There's a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses that I deal with on here. One guy's an older guy. I forget exactly where he's from. It's interesting because when you're on here, you never really know who they really are or where they're really from unless they choose to tell you, and if they're true in what they're telling you. I've got one older guy, pretty reasonable. We have some nice discussions. Another guy he goes by the screen name the Mad JW. And if you ever hear this, Mad, I love you, man. This guy, he's called me an idiot. He's called me stupid. He's called me Antichrist. But something about him, just one of these days, And it's the weirdest thing. I'm like drawn to these kind of people. The ones that are the most strident, arrogant, call you all kinds of names, and someday they're going to be a Christian. So pray for the Mad JW. And next. So this is an interesting one called Quora. Quora is not devoted just to Jehovah's Witnesses. It's a big general question and answer thing. So you can go up there, post a question, and whoever wants to will come along and answer it. So there's a fair amount of stuff up there, and you'll notice the question, why do Jehovah's Witnesses believe they're always right? And I'll just read a little bit at the bottom. It says, before I answer, I find it interesting how many non-witnesses, ex-witnesses, former witnesses, etc., are quick to offer their own jaded interpretation of what I believe. Think he's a Jehovah's Witness? So the opportunity here is that a lot of times the witnesses will answer questions about Jehovah's Witnesses, and then you can come in and give them the real answer. And a lot of times they are unfamiliar with their own history, so you can come in and give them the historical facts. There's one up there I'm just dying to address when I get home. Somebody asked, how did they come up with the name Jehovah's Witnesses in 1931? And the witness gets in there and he says, oh, it's a scriptural name and blah, 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 Isaiah 43:10, all of that. And if you actually read the account, I forget which one it was, but he was saying basically Joseph Rutherford knew that every year they came up with something spectacular at their big convention, and he didn't have anything for that. He says, oh, well, we'll come up with a new name, Jehovah's Witnesses. And a lot of it was to differentiate themselves from other Bible student groups at that point. And next, Shay. So Stack Exchange is another general question and answer site. They have a section on biblical hermeneutics if you want to kind of geek out on some of that stuff. It's got some really good deep stuff. Not all of it is directly applicable to Jehovah's Witnesses, but if you're into that kind of thing, it's really good. And next, this is where you get really heavy. Academia.edu is a place where people post academic papers. And there are some about Jehovah's Witnesses. There are some about other theological things that you may want to look at. Now, in contrast to the extremely scholarly, we have, next, Facebook. How many people are on Facebook? Yeah, a fair amount of you. Facebook is really interesting. I find it a really good place to catch up with people. And I had the weirdest thing this year. So back in October 1975, I was a Jehovah's Witness going door to door in this neighborhood in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And friend of mine and I, we run across these two Hispanic guys. And we get talking to them, come to find out they'd just gotten off a ship from Columbia and Portsmouth. They were trying to get to this one guy's sister in New Jersey who just happened to be a Jehovah's Witness. So we thought, oh, Jehovah's direction. And so it was October in New England. It was cold, and they weren't dressed for it. We had some warm clothes. We set them up with that, took them to our Kingdom Hall that Sunday. They didn't have enough money for bus money, so we set them up with that, put them on the bus to New Jersey. Off they went. And over the years, I thought, I wonder whatever happened to Herman. I wonder if he got down to his sisters, became a Jehovah's Witness. And I'd always remembered his full name, Herman Velez Belcazar. So when was it? I think it was last summer. I went on Facebook and I look up Herman Velez Belcazar, and I find one. And so I shoot him a message. Are you the same Herman Velez Belcazar that was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire back in 1975? Nothing. Then, was it May or so? I get a text message on Facebook. Bob, I can't believe it. It's a miracle of God that, we found each other. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So, I said, so what's going on? And he had stayed here in the States, worked various places, ended up in New York City, retired in 2006, went back to Columbia, never became a Jehovah's Witness, and he's involved in a church in Columbia helping out the poor people down there. And just talk about a divine appointment. Coincidence? I think not. Oh yeah, sometimes I use it to look up my old Jehovah's Witness friends, find out what they're up to. They've been warned about Facebook, but they're still there. Next slide. Oh, there you go. So the other good thing on Facebook is these Facebook groups. This one is called Help Jehovah's Witnesses. This one is crazy. There's 3,100 people in there, and they're having up to 50 people a day joining up, a lot from Africa. Some of them are Jehovah's Witnesses, some of them are ex-witnesses. So there's at least some interchange there. And next. This is a good one, XJW prayer support. So if you have prayer requests for family members, friends, other people involved in Jehovah's Witness ministry, you can leave prayer requests up there. And next, Shay. Jehovah's Witnesses and biblical discussion. Again, an opportunity to actually interact with Jehovah's Witnesses there on Facebook. There are some pretty spirited discussions that go on in that forum too. And next, Twitter. You people tweet? Who tweets here? Okay, not many. You don't? Do you follow President Trump? No, you don't have to answer that. Yeah, the president is rather fond of Twitter, which is interesting. Twitter is this thing, you post things and you're limited to 140 characters. So you need to be fairly concise when you're posting up there. And you follow people. So everyone that you follow, whatever they post shows up in your feed the next day. Go ahead, Shay. Here's a little Twitter funny. Yeah. It makes me wonder, what would Jesus do with the internet? I'm sure he'd use it appropriately, but wow. Twitter's a good place to follow. There's some really good authors and good Christian leaders that are on there that tweet. So if you like to get these little just pearls of wisdom in your feed in the morning, they're good. I follow Greg Kokel at Stand to Reason Ministries. He's got a great way of approaching alternative religious groups. Desiring God, John Piper's feed, Ed Stetzer, A.W. Tozer, he's gone, but people are posting his stuff. And Don Vino from Midwest Christian Outreach. Next, Shay. Next, other direction. There you go. YouTube. YouTube's gone nuts within the last couple of years. Anyone with a cell phone, with a smartphone that's got a camera on it, you can YouTube stuff. And so there is stuff of varying quality up there. I've noticed lately there's a lot of couples up there. For ex-witnesses, you got Mike and Kim, you got Mark and Cora, and two I found just the other day, Rob and Sharon. Rob was a Jehovah's Witness for 45 years, and they've found their way out and are Christians now. Another guy on Facebook, Brian Garcia, I don't know if many of you know him. He was online, he was on YouTube as New Age Gamer 3018, defending the Watchtower for quite a while. And then God got a hold of him, he got out. I had the pleasure of being on John Ankerberg with him. That was easy because he dominated the show. The rest of us didn't have all that much to do. But bright young guy, he was in Connecticut, and then he moved out to Vancouver, Canada, pastoring a church out there. Okay, next. Internet radio. This is kind of an interesting thing, too. Go ahead, Shay. One of the ones that I like is Blog Talk Radio, the Healing X Outreach. Melissa Bramer's involved in that, Gus Estacio. Go ahead, Shay. And if you can read that, rebroadcast Melissa Bramer interviews Charles Smith, former Jehovah's Witness. So they've been really good about having someone involved in the Pennsylvania conference on to kind of plug that ahead of it. Lots of good stuff on there if you are recovering from being a Jehovah's Witness. And next, FaceTime, Skype, and Google Hangouts. These are kind of cool little tools. They're FaceTime's an Apple product, so if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you've got it on there. It's like a video phone thing. So you can call somebody up and if he's got a camera, you can actually see each other. It's only a one-to-one. Skype and Google Hangouts, you can have multiple people on there, so you can do a big video conference sort of thing. Let's see. Yeah, another thing they're handy for is Bible study. I had a guy down in Florida that I did Bible studies over the phone with for a while, and I actually finally got to meet him face to face, taught him how to use FaceTime, and then we have Bible studies with FaceTime so we can actually see each other while we're doing the study. That's always good. Another tool that I didn't do a slide for, blueletterbible.org. Yeah. You can search for verses or words, and it will bring you up the verses that have those words. It's got the interlinear, so you can get into the Greek, and you can look at the tenses of the Greek verbs. You can go as far as you want to geek that one out. Another tool I use, go ahead, Shay. Oh, I forgot. The World's End Theology Outlet. This is the thing. Don Vino does a Google Hangout thing, and he does like an interview type thing, and I've been on there, and he has these funny little fake ads from the World's End Theology Outlet, the left foot of disfellowship and things like this. Go ahead, Shay. Evernote is something I use in another vain attempt to be organized. Next. There's an eye chart. Evernote is good for taking notes. You can copy and paste stuff in it. You can organize it by subject. I've got one notebook that is just Watchtower stuff. I've got another one I use just for when I'm taking notes at church. I've got another one that's just quotes of varying things. It's full text searchable. So if you go, I wrote something down about the governing body inspired 2 years ago, I don't know where, governing body inspired, and it'll show you all the posts, that all the notes that you have that have that in it. You can also organize them with tags. It's also cloud-based. So needless to say, I have multiple devices. I have my phone, I have my iPad, I've got my iMac at home, I've got another computer. And if you sign up for this thing, I think I pay $49 a year. All of the notes that I take anywhere are available on all of my devices everywhere I go. So if you do a lot of stuff and you want a lot of information at hand easily, this is a pretty good way to go. Okay, next. And yeah, so as we mentioned before, there's a staggering amount of information out there, and it raises two problems, one of which is accuracy, and the other is volume. First of all, with accuracy, next. Yeah, the good bit, good, the bad, and the ugly. One more. I hope I don't need to explain that. You know, it's funny, sometimes we will sometimes latch on to a piece of information about Jehovah's Witnesses that's uncomplimentary to them and not really check it out because we really want it to be true. You need to be careful about that. You know, back when I first started with this 20 years ago, there weren't many voices out there about Jehovah's Witnesses online. There were a few, but now there's just so many. And so we do have to be careful. You know, as Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. And so when you're dealing with information, you really need to verify your sources. A lot of times, it's good to check that piece of information from more than one source, and don't go passing it on till you know it's true or not. Also, because of the sheer volume, we might miss what's important. Go ahead, Shay. Yeah, I'll read this. It says, information is the enemy of insight. The essence of a problem, solution, or opportunity is usually hidden in plain sight, surrounded by wads of undigested, and I'll add undigestible, and unnecessary data. Half the battle is eliminating the noise. A rule of thumb, simplify, simplify, simplify. You know, I read that simplify and it kind of shivers up my spine because the Watchtower always used to use that. But this is important. A lot of times we are so inundated with the information that we miss what's really important. It's the old forest for the trees type of thing. So how do you filter that? That's a tough one. I always tell people if they had invented ADHD when I was a kid, I'd had it, but they hadn't invented it yet, so I didn't. Boy, I can go down rabbit holes in a heartbeat on the internet. I'll start researching something, and pretty soon I'm so far down some rabbit hole, I forgot where I started. So a certain amount of discipline is important there. Targeted research, you know, keep in mind, you know, a lot of times when I'll be researching something, it will be in response to something that a Jehovah's Witness had posted on some other forum. So that helps me to stay focused. Another thing, just pray. Pray for the Holy Spirit to direct you to the information that you need for what you're doing at the moment. Next. Providing. So this, like I said, there's like three roles that you fill here. You're a consumer, you're a provider, or you're networking, which is kind of doing both at the same time. Being on the internet is easy. You can get on Facebook, all of that stuff for nothing. If you want a website, if you're inclined in that direction, that's really easy. I pay about, I think it's $180 a year for the web host that I've got. They've been really good. I've had them for a bunch of years now. They're, you know, my website's always up. For content, you know, most people really don't want to go out and learn HTML and JavaScript and all that stuff. I use a thing called WordPress. It allows you to set up your web page pretty easily. You can set it up so you can post articles from your phone if you want. That's pretty easy. Think about what role, you know, as you approach the internet, what role do you want to play as an information provider? Are you going to be an exposure type thing where all you're basically exposing the Watchtower for what it is? Are you more apologetics, support? Probably a combination of different ones. Oh yeah, this next one, I like this one. Oops, one more. I'm a firm believer that everything necessary needs to be said, but not everyone needs to say it. A lot of times I'll be online and I'll read something and go, yep, I don't need to add anything to that. I don't need to add to the noise. And there are plenty of people out there who are there because, not because they have something to say, but they have to say something. So, and after a while you learn who those people are when you're dealing in any particular area of the internet. And next, Shay. Yeah, interpersonal networking, this is huge. Right from the get-go, my support structure coming out of the witnesses was people online, ex-witnesses, other people who had never been witnesses that were Christians that were called to minister to Jehovah's Witnesses. I can't stress the importance of that enough. I mentioned before about, I'll get back to divine appointments in a minute. So, as I mentioned before, Bible study, online support, also ministry coordination. If you're involved in a ministry where everyone's not in the same place, this is a good way to kind of keep everybody together. I know when I do the Google Hangout thing with Don Vino, he's in the Chicago area, and Ron is in Florida somewhere, I think. Oh, and somebody mentioned building relationships. That's what this is all about. It's funny, the first Witnesses Now for Jesus conference I went to was in 1998, and I met people there who I'd known for 2 years online. I'd never seen them face to face before. That was really cool. Go ahead, Shay, next one. Yeah, the non-technical stuff. If we're really going to make an impact with Jehovah's Witnesses on the internet, we need to be both accurate and ethical. It's already been mentioned about how we deal with Jehovah's Witnesses online. We need to deal with them from a position of respect, even if they're not respecting us. It's kind of like, if we're going to claim the high moral ground, we really need to be on the high moral ground. Belittling them, ridiculing them, name-calling, even if that's what they're doing to us, doesn't help our cause. And compassion is a big thing. If you were a Jehovah's Witness, remember where you came from. Remember what you were like when you were on the other end of this thing. I'm constantly reminded of that. I could be a real pain in the neck, I'll tell you. And some of these people I see that are real pains, I go, yeah, maybe you bother me so much because you're just like I was back then. Anger, a lot of us deal with a lot of anger from having been Jehovah's Witnesses, but stop and think about who are you angry at and why? You angry at the elders that disfellowshipped you? They probably did you the biggest favor ever. Are you angry at former friends and family that shun you now? If you were Jehovah's Witness, you know what they're thinking. You know where they're coming from. Are you angry in the forum you're in because they just called you an idiot and an antichrist and other things that I can't mention here? Next slide. Yeah, Romans 12:17 really applies here. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not overcome evil by evil, but overcome evil with good. Make no mistake, we're in a battle. And there's some real evil out there. But we don't overcome it by becoming evil ourselves. Next one, Shay. Yeah, I mentioned before divine appointments, mentioned Herman. That just amazed me. I'll tell you just a couple quick ones. First, a guy named Abel. Abel got in touch with us through the Jehovah's Witnesses Now for Jesus website, and he just left a message up there. I've been kind of in and out of this for years. I need to just finalize this. Where do I go? What do I do? Give me a call. So I give him a call, and come to find out his mother was a special pioneer. His father had been an elder in Cuba, and they came over in the late 60s, and he'd kind of been in and out of it for years. And he goes, what do I do? Where do I go? So I says, well, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm reading the Bible. I'm praying for the Holy Spirit to really show me what's right. He says, I'm finding stuff I've never seen before. I said, well, that's good. Keep doing that. Then he says, where do I go? And some of you that know me know my standard rant on John 6:68. You know, the witnesses have always, the Watchtower says, if you leave, where else will you go? And they'll cite John 6:68. And I take them there, I said, read it. You know, this is when Jesus was talking about eating his flesh, drinking his blood. Some of the people went off in a huff because they didn't really get what he was talking about. Jesus turns to the disciples and says, you going to leave too? And Peter, being Peter, answers first and says, not, Lord, where shall we go? Lord, to whom shall we go? And Abel says, you mean I go to Jesus? I said, yep. He goes, well, that's awful simple. I said, yep. And within 2 weeks, he was saved. I'm driving home from work up 495 in Boston traffic. I get this phone call. I'm on my little Bluetooth headset, and he says, I had just given him Romans 8:26. When we don't know how to pray, the Holy Spirit intercedes for us with groanings unuttered. And he says, that scripture you gave me just blew me away. He says, I've been bawling for 2 days. I'm like, really? And then he says, I just hit the ground and gave myself to Jesus. I'm driving up the road. And then he got baptized a month later. And really cool guy. He's a big guy. He makes me look a little small. And he just goes up to people on the street. God wants me to pray for you. Is something I can pray for you about? And he has some really great experiences there. Another one is a guy named Brett. We were on vacation 2 years ago, and Brett got a hold of us through the Witnesses Now for Jesus. Give me a call. He'd had a friend from school days. They had been friends, and he's in his 50s now. She ended up in this horrible marriage, and he was abusive, and I won't get into details. But anyway, she decides to leave him. Now, she was brought up, I think he said, in a Pentecostal church. So she was, had a Christian upbringing. The week she got rid of this abusive husband, witnesses called at her door, and she's a Jehovah's Witness now. And Brett was beside himself. Oh, she's studying with him. We talked quite a bit. Well, things didn't turn out with this woman quite the way he hoped. But Brett and I have become great friends. We message all the time. He has this great thing he does. On your text, on your phone, he's got like 60 people that are a prayer chain there. So he sends out prayer requests on his phone for text. Let's see. Oh yeah, this I don't know if you've ever read the book Divine Appointments. It's by Bob and Matthew Jacks, father and son. Great book. If I keep this log of all these divine appointments I've had over the years. Go ahead, Shay. So this is Matthew talking about his mother. He says, she simply appreciates that those with the greatest resistance to God often have the greatest need for him and often make his greatest road warriors. With this attitude, she marks the most challenging divine appointments as the most promising. And I talked about that a little earlier. I'm just drawn to the ones that seem to be the toughest cases. And I just get this feel that they don't know how badly they need Jesus. And one more. So the main thing. There's a lot wrong with Jehovah's Witnesses. And a lot of people are posting about a lot of stuff. You know, the child molestation thing is a huge thing. The shunning, financial involvement with the UN, it goes on, but those aren't the main thing. Those are all symptoms of the problem. The problem is they're false teachings. They teach a false Jesus. They teach a false gospel. All of that other stuff, as horrendous as it is, isn't the main thing. And, you know, while we have to deal with these scandals, a lot of times they're useful for helping people who are witnesses come to realize that the organization isn't what it purports to be. We need to make it plain, both to ourselves and to them, those aren't the main thing. The gospel is the main thing. You know, exposure is important. Ephesians 5:11 tells us to not participate in the works of darkness, but go on exposing them, and that's important. But we don't want to just be scandal mongers. You know, we don't want to be to Jehovah's Witnesses what the National Enquirer is to the entertainment industry. We need to keep the main thing the main thing. And I've talked to some people who go, oh, if I hit them with the gospel right off, you know, it'll scare them off. I don't think so. I think the only people who can be scared off by the gospel is the people that aren't going to take it anyway. I think a lot of the people who are dealing with a lot of these other issues don't know they need the gospel, but when they hear it, they'll see it for what it is. So in conclusion, you know, the internet, it's a great tool. Like any other tool, we need to use it properly. And if we do, I guess in conclusion, kind of a plea for excellence. You know, there's a lot of information out there that is of dubious quality. And I think we need to, you know, some of you do a great job already, but, you know, I'm convicted by this from time to time. I go back, look at my old website from time to time, and I go, ooh, I need to do something with that, you know. And what I'm really, it's a call for excellence. You know, do what we do well. And, of course, the Holy Spirit is there to help us with that. So I hope this has been helpful. Do we have a minute for questions, or are there any questions? No? Oh, yeah. 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 Yeah, they, in rough numbers, last time I looked, they were baptizing about 300,000 a year. But when you look at how they have what they call publishers. These are the people that are actually going door to door and turning in their time slip every month. You know, they do that. And they gain, so when they baptize 300,000 people, you would think they'd gain about 300,000 publishers. Well, they gain about 200,000. So neighborhood 100,000 a year. A lot of the people they're baptizing are kids. You know, I've been seeing children. You know, I've seen them as young as 8 recently. For years, they kind of discouraged that. They said, you know, wait till you're older. You know, I've gotten into a conversation. You know, the Watchtower said, your decision to be baptized as a Jehovah's Witness is the most important decision of your life. And I'll ask a witness, more important than marriage? Yeah. I said, well, so how does an 8-year-old that isn't prepared to make decisions about marriage make this most important decision of your life? And even adults, when they go into it, I mean, I was an alleged adult at 20, almost 24 when I was baptized. I had studied with them for almost a year at that point, but I didn't realize the real ramifications. When you're baptized now, you are accountable to their judicial system. And, you know, no one ever thinks they're going to be disfellowshipped. No one ever thinks they're going to leave this spiritual paradise that they call it. But, you know, when you do, the effects can be devastating. So about 100,000 a year, short answer. Yes. Yeah, that now you're a member, if you will, and you are accountable to their leadership at that point. Yep, yep. Yeah, there's a couple of books that you go through, and then there's a whole set of questions. It used to be 80, then it was up to like 200 questions if they did them all, including the optional ones. But yeah, you don't just, believe and get baptized. It's not like the Ethiopian, look, a body of water. Yeah, yeah, that doesn't happen. Yeah, Matt. Yep. Well, not quite that, but there's the whole process you go through. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Julie? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, actually, when I was baptized back in 1974, before they dunked us under, he actually said, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They don't say that anymore. Now they say, hold your nose. That should tell you something. Anyway, any others? Yes, Steve.
When you're witnessing to an active witness online,
Yep.
what is the most effective thing, or what are the things that they're most surprised to learn?
Oh, it's totally dependent on the person. Yeah, you kind of have to get to know them a little bit. And a lot of times, like I had been off topics for a couple of years, and so I went in, and they call it lurking. I just went in there and just watched how people posted and kind of oh yeah, I remember that guy from 2 years ago. He was a pain back then. He's a pain now. This guy looks like he's got some potential. And you kind of see where they're coming from, what their hot button issues are, and kind of go from there. So, well, good. Thank you for listening.